What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Get Paid for Your Pad. It's been a couple of weeks since I recorded an episode, but now I am back. I've been very busy with traveling, but also managing other people's portfolios, doing revenue management, which has been pretty awesome. We have a lot of clients now, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. And today I have a special guest, Mrs. Kaye, or Miss or Mrs. I never know which one it is, but Kaye Putnam. She is the CMO for Freewyld, and she's joining today actually to ask me questions. So I'm very excited about that. I know you had your own podcast, Kaye, as well. So welcome to the show, and tell us what we're talking about today.
Yeah, we are turning the tables on Jasper today, and I am going to be the one interviewing him. Thank you so much for having me, Jasper. I'm excited to do this. I wanted to dive into RPM, revenue and pricing management, this service that we launched a couple months ago, because I know that you and Eric came on the show and introduced it to everybody. You've been chatting with some of our clients, but I wanted to dig deeper. So I am here to ask you all of the questions and to get all of the insight from you. So I'm really excited for this. And I think we'll just dive right in. So for the unacquainted, can you summarize RPM in a sentence or two?
Summarize RPM in a sentence or two. RPM is essentially, it is a service, as you mentioned, we call it revenue and pricing management. It is a service that we launched where we completely take over the revenue management for our clients, right? What that means is we are in the pricing tool, setting all the parameters, developing the strategy, and then going in there on a daily basis to look at the performance, to look at market data, and to make adjustments as we see fit. On top of that, we also consult on other areas of the business. I think one thing that most operators don't realize is that every part of your business drives to revenue, right? We got to get good reviews. We got to have a good messaging flow, right? We got to have good marketing. Our Airbnb listings have to be top notch, right? Our direct booking site needs to be well designed and convert viewers into bookers, right? So there's a lot of aspects like email marketing, there's cleaning, like, everything leads to revenue management. So essentially, like, we can't really maximize the revenue if the other departments in the business aren't like optimized to be able to drive that revenue. So yeah, that's basically it. We take over anything that has to do with pricing, and then we do a weekly call where we consult and advise on other parts in the business where we see an opportunity for some improvements.
Yeah, amazing. I've been learning so much through this process. My husband and I have our own rental, so I am new to this whole arena, but through Freewyld and through RPM and marketing it, I've been learning a lot. But for people who have a more basic knowledge of pricing, this is kind of like how hotels and airlines will dynamically adjust pricing up and down based on demand. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's definitely comparable. There's one very big difference between pricing airline seats and hotel rooms versus short-term rentals, because an airline can sell a lot of seats, right? An airline might have, let's say, 100 seats. So for the airline, it's it's a different model because, like, they look at how many seats are we expected to sell X amount of days out. If they sell more seats than they expect, then they can raise their prices. And the same is for hotels, right? Let's say you have 100 rooms and all the rooms are kind of similar, right? But with short-term rentals, it's very different because we can only sell our space once, right? And that makes it very, very interesting. And hotels and airlines, they have, for the last like 30, 40 years at least, or maybe even longer, they've invested heavily into data scientists and all sorts of models to calculate like what is the optimal price, right? Because obviously that's going to affect the overall revenue and profitability of these companies quite a bit. So for the short-term rental world, it's a bit different. And, I think most operators, from what we see, most operators see revenue management kind of as a side job, right? A lot of the operators, they do their own revenue management, but it's not really their focus. It's just something that they do as part of, doing a lot of other things in their business. And that's, I think, something that, especially for larger operators, I think in today's competitive climate, somebody has to be really focused on the revenue management every single day. I think I'm going ahead of what your question really was. But so let me just stick with your question. Yes, it's very similar to how airlines and hotels price, but it's just different in the fact that we only can sell our unit once. And all of our, typically, like, our units are not identical, right? Some people
Right.
do have similar, units, rooms in one building, but most operators don't.
Yeah. So it sounds like the stakes are higher because we don't have that opportunity to sell 100 seats or 100 rooms. It really is that one booking for that one time period in each property. And speaking of higher stakes, we've chosen to partner with operators who are making over $1 million in cumulative revenue. Why did we choose to work with that type of operator specifically, and why is this so important for that client?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Eric and I have worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of operators over the last 5 years, hosts and operators. And there's a certain journey as you scale, right? If you have 2 or 3 units, it's very different business than if you have 20 or 25 units. And then it's a very different business if you have 100 units, right? So there's a lot of things change as you scale up to a larger portfolio. And when it comes to revenue management, if you have like a couple of units, it kind of makes sense for you as an operator to do the revenue management, because it doesn't take that much time and you're not really overwhelmed with everything else that goes on in the business, right? So for smaller hosts, it kind of makes sense to just educate yourself and take on that role of being the revenue manager in your business, if if it's something that you enjoy doing, right? Now, once you get to like, 15, 20, 25 and upwards, now that revenue management is really taking like, an hour or maybe 2 hours a day to manage. And most operators at that level, at that scale, they're kind of overwhelmed. And as a result, they kind of they do everything else first, right? You got to make sure that all the units are cleaned, coordinating with the cleaners, guest communication. They do all that stuff first, and then if they have some time left, maybe they'll look at the pricing, right? So at that level, it kind of makes sense to outsource it, the revenue management side, to a service provider. Now, if you're much larger, right, if you have like a few hundred listings and you're doing like 10, 15 million a year on Airbnb or as top line revenue, then you could hire a full-time in-house revenue manager. So it's we're kind of, for us, it kind of makes sense to work with those operators that are kind of in between, right? They're like at least $1 million of top line revenue, but they're not to the size yet where they can, just hire a full-time revenue manager in-house.
Yeah, that makes sense. Love that. What are most operators getting wrong? Like, why is there even a need for this service? Why aren't they seeing the results themselves that you see with our clients?
Yeah, for sure. Well, number one is what we already touched on. It's, in order to really maximize your revenue, you got to spend, I want to say, like an hour at least per day, looking at your bookings, looking at market data, looking at everything that happens with the pricing, right? And most operators just don't do that. It's either because they don't have the time, or it's because they're not really sure what to look at in the first place. Because if you I mean, and I don't know if you've looked at pricing tools much, but if you look at a pricing tool for the first time, it's very overwhelming. There's all these different numbers. There's so many different levers that we can pull. Not just like the prices, but also like, what's our minimum night stay? How does that change over time? Because you could say like, well, I'll accept a 2-night booking on the weekend, in the last couple of weeks, but maybe, a couple months into the future, you might want to have like a 3-night minimum stay, right? So like all those things are dynamic. There's so many different levers that you can pull that it's very overwhelming. And as a result, most operators, have a set it and forget it approach where, they'll set base prices and they'll set some parameters and then they just kind of let it run. And that's just not optimal. That's just not optimal. Plus, it's not that simple, revenue management. Like there's a lot of data that we have, market data, and that we can look at, but you need the experience and the knowledge to really understand like what kind of data do I need to look at, what numbers do I need to look at, and how do I drive a decision based on those numbers, right? That's what I see that a lot of operators struggle with. Like, yeah, they know where to find like length of stay data, they know where to find booking window data, they know where we can look into the future and see like what our pacing is, or in simple words, like how much occupancy is in the books for the future in our market. They know where to find that information, but they don't really know how to then make a decision on how to change pricing, right? So, it's a how do you say that? It's a specialty job, right? It's just like the plumber knows how to do the plumbing, right? Because the plumber learned how to do it and they have a lot of experience with it. Well, that's kind of like the same with revenue management. It's more of an art than a science, I would say, because it's not like mathematics where it's like 1 + 1 is 2 and there's nobody can argue about it, right? Well, with revenue management, there's so many factors and it's so dynamic. Everything changes every day. So there's no way to calculate an optimal solution. And so it's more of a soft skill that you have to learn over time, just by doing it. And just learning from experience. And for us, or for myself, I now manage about 250 listings over 7 different portfolios. And you see there's a lot of trial and error involved as well. So like if I see something that works really well in one portfolio, I could try that on a different portfolio, right? And that's kind of the benefit that I have from managing, different portfolios. A single operator doesn't have that benefit. They only know their own portfolio, they only know their own market, right? So and then lastly, you gotta have fun with it, right? A lot of people just, I don't understand why, but a lot of people don't think it's fun to look at numbers and graphs all day. Like for me, that's all I want to do. For me, that's the most fun thing I can do. But most people don't like doing that, right? And so if you don't like doing it, then you're probably not going to be doing a very good job at it as well, right?
Jasper, I'm so grateful that you are the type of human that loves to look at data and numbers and decipher strategy. I've been on the marketing side of things. I've been wrestling with Google Analytics over the last couple of days, and it just melts my brain. And I'm sure a lot of hosts and operators can commiserate with that feeling when they're looking at their pricing tool, whatever that is, Price Labs or what have you, because it really is it's a skill set for sure, but there's a gift that some people have for numbers and for seeing the forest through the trees when they're looking at those really complicated sets of data, which is amazing. And as a marketer, by the way, I should have mentioned this before my last question, but if you are below $1 million, we have basically like a DIY program where you can learn our process that we do for our RPM clients. It's called Cash Flow Mastery. So if you want to learn about that, we'll include the link below. So we're not just leaving you in the dark if you're not at that $1 million mark, but this is just this bespoke done for you service where we're catering to that specific range of clients, because we could see that we can help them so dang much. Because especially when you're at over $1 million, those few percentage points of growth can make a massive difference. 1% of, I don't know, 50K might not make a huge difference, but 1% of 2 million can make a really, really big difference for our clients. And we're seeing that every day. So that's a situation. People are ignoring it. They're not spending enough time on it. They don't know what to do with the numbers, even if they are maybe spending like button seat minutes in front of their pricing tool. They're not making effective decisions that are driving results. So how does RPM solve those problems? What are you doing with our clients to get results?
Yeah, 100%. Well, I mean, first of all, I spend a lot of time in their portfolio. So I go in there every single day. And I have the time to, because that's the only thing I do. right now. I don't do anything else anymore, as you know, on our team, which I'm very happy about that, because I love doing this. So yeah, going in there every single day, I look at every single booking that comes in, right? Because every booking has information that can help you to drive decisions on how you want to price in the portfolio. There's another thing that I spend a lot of time on, which is setting Airbnb custom promotions. And if you're listening to this and you haven't leveraged Airbnb custom promotions, then I highly recommend take a look at that. It's a very powerful tool where we can give discounts to guests, but the way that Airbnb calculates the base rate where they take the discount from is not the price that we have in our pricing tool, but it's actually an average of a range that they calculate. So long story short, it's a pretty it's very there's a lot of nuance to it on how to leverage these custom promotions. You really have to like get very nitty gritty, and you have to adjust as well several times a week, because once you set an Airbnb custom promotion, the price is fixed, and so then as you get closer to the check-in, the price on Airbnb is going to be different from what you have in your pricing tool, and so you kind of have to go in there every single day to review them, and so it just takes a lot of focus, and it takes some brain power to really understand like how to leverage these things correctly. But then also it's just, we have to look at the data to understand if our pricing strategy makes sense in the first place, right? And how do we know what the best base price is? How do we know if how much we should discount last minute, or maybe we want to add a premium on future bookings? Like, how do we adjust our minimum stays? There's so many different things that we can implement in our strategy. And if you only have the experience of looking at your own portfolio, then it's very difficult for an operator who's not necessarily good with numbers, there's not a lot of education on revenue management for short-term rental hosts. I mean, you can Google, try and find a course. I mean, you just mentioned we have a course, Cash Flow Mastery, but there's not a lot of education out there. So I would almost say, like, man, you can't really expect an operator to do a great job at this, because if there's no education, and like most people go into hospitality because they're people persons, right? They like, they want to provide a cool experience for their guests. They're not necessarily like good with numbers, right? And it's not necessarily what they enjoy doing. So yeah, I mean, it's not that easy. If you don't have a lot of experience and it's not really your thing, then it's very understandable that you're not going to do the best job possible, right? I mean, if you put me in marketing, right? I don't really like marketing. When you talk about all these different words and branding, and it just doesn't really make sense to me, because it's not a number. So if it's not a number, it doesn't really make sense to me. So yeah, if I was to do the marketing for our company, like, yeah, I wouldn't do a great job, and it's the same for revenue management.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. And not only that, but you are paying attention to all of the shifts and changes as they happen, because you have the time and you can see how that affects things. You're sending stuff over to me all the time for Freewyld, and sometimes it feels like magic. I'm pulling our data for like our booking or occupancy from the previous week. Just, I think a week or two ago, I saw that our bookings had improved by like 400% from the previous week. And I knew that Jasper was doing his magic behind the scenes, whether that was the custom promotions or some other tweak that he was making. And of course, it's going to fluctuate from week to week, but it has a real impact on your business. And speaking of real impact, let's get concrete here. Let's talk about what are some of the success stories that you've seen so far with a client or two of ours.
Yeah, for sure. So right now we work with 7 clients, and we're kind of in like some different markets. We're in like a beach market, we're in a major city, smaller city. So we have a pretty nice variety of clients that we work with. Some of our clients we have one client that we started working with. We took over their revenue management in April. So this service, we launched it, what was it, like six months ago or something, right? So it's a pretty new service. but yeah, like our first client is probably one of our more, if not the most successful client that we have, and I can I can share my screen and we can just look
Please.
at actual numbers
Yes.
instead of me just saying that we're doing great. um, but yeah, let me pull it up actually because I have the sheet here. So I'll share my screen. Because it's also interesting, like how do you even compare, right? How do you even like know if you're doing better or worse? And that's something that I noticed a lot of operators actually also struggle with. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah, so a lot of operators also they don't really know how to evaluate themselves, right? How good of a job am I doing with my revenue management? Like, am I doing better than last year? Am I doing worse? But then also, like, what's the market doing, right? So we created for the cash flow mastery students, we created this sheet, or I should say, I created this sheet, where we can just literally like pull data directly from Price Labs, which is the tool that we use. We can just download the portfolio data and the market data, and then we can get a good idea for how are we doing, how are we performing, right? Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. Okay. So what we see here is we see our performance, our portfolio performance from January all the way through June. And then we can also see how did the market do, right? Because yeah, we could be up 20%. So in this example, in January, our client in January was up 20%. But then in terms of revenue, but then they added more units, right? So the revenue is not really the best KPI to look at. The best KPI to look at is really RevPAR, right? Because RevPAR, we could do a whole episode about KPIs, but it basically stands for revenue per available room. And that's really the best KPI to look at. So in January, our client was down 2.64%, but then the RevPAR in the market was actually up 6.14%, right? So if we want to take that into account, then the performance of the portfolio was really like down 8%, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we call the cash flow mastery index. I just came up with that name, but that's how we compare the performance, right? That's how we evaluate, like, how are we doing? We want to always adjust for what's happening in the market, right?
Yep.
Now, this client, we started talking to him in January, and then initially they wanted to do their own revenue management, so we were consulting. February, he was doing a little bit better than the year before, 1% up. Then March, 2% up. But then in April, we actually took over the revenue management, and as you can see, we actually did 21% better than last year in April compared to the market. And then in May, we went up to 38%, and in June, we were at 43%, which sounds absolutely crazy. And I'll be honest, I did not think that we were going to be able to impact the portfolio this much. But obviously, the client is pretty happy with it. Now, this is not just as a caveat. This is not, typical for all our clients. But yeah, my estimate when we started working, I told this client, I think we can raise your revenue by like somewhere between 10 and 20%. Like, it kind of blew my mind actually to see how much we outperformed. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's amazing. And just
it's
to
fun.
highlight,
It's fun when you make people more money
heck
because they're very
yes,
happy.
becomes a very easy yes. And just to highlight how you started that case study, it's so interesting because if you were to look at your bottom line and see that you're 20% up, the gut reaction, especially if you're not digging deeply into the numbers, be like, oh, we're doing better. We obviously must be doing something right. This is amazing. Or on the flip side, if you see that your performance is going down, it can be really easy to blame that on the market and be like, well, maybe people just aren't taking as many vacations, or more price sensitive, people are watching their wallets, et cetera, et cetera. And if you don't really know, then you could be making decisions based on bad data or even just bad feelings. So it's really powerful to have that deep understanding and that clarity and certainty of exactly how you're doing so that you can make decisions. And I know that we don't see 40% improvement with every client every month by any means. Can you quantify or reflect on, like, why was there such a massive difference from basically pacing with the market to when we took it over and they're seeing just this incredible improvement?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really one thing, it's a lot of things. Like this particular example, this client, he actually just managed to become super hosts, right? So as I mentioned before, like, we can come up with like a very effective pricing strategy, but it's not just that, right? It's also, we improved the marketing side quite a bit, right? So improving the Airbnb listings, changing the order of the photos, adding things like captions and things like that. Just really optimizing the marketing side, that really helps. Number two is, adjusting. I think a big thing that we changed for this particular client was the weekday versus weekend pricing.
Mm.
So this client, the weekends were mostly booked, but then the weekdays were pretty much open. And that was because they were pricing too flat, right? So, and that's what most operators do. I think most people price too flat. And what that means is that we're not raising the prices enough when there's high demand, and we're not lowering the prices enough when there's low demand. So that's one of the very first thing that we changed. We started leveraging the Airbnb early bird promotion. That's a promotion you can do in Airbnb that's pretty powerful. That helps you expand your booking window. I think we doubled the booking window for this client's portfolio, which means it used to be around 7, so very short. And we managed to get it up to around like 14, so 2 weeks. And that's, I wouldn't say that's mostly because of that early bird promotion that we started leveraging Airbnb, but also like we removed like the future premium, so that it's not more expensive to book in the future. We leveraged the Airbnb custom promotions. We're adjusting the base prices. We're adjusting, things based on like how the market is looking into the future. That's called pacing. So that's something that they never looked at. So I can see like, hey, the market's looking really strong in the next couple of weeks, or it's looking really weak. Then we want to adjust our prices based on that. So yeah, long story short, I guess there's just like so many different things that will drive that additional revenue. I also, just to be completely fair, also do think that that 43% that we saw, for some reason their month last year was also like pretty weak. I don't know why, because I wasn't there last year, but I just noticed that their RevPAR was like pretty low in June. So I don't know what happened there, but I don't think we can hit that 40% every month. But we're pretty consistently doing anywhere between 20 and 40% for this client. But yeah, there's a lot of work. I mean, I remember initially they wanted to train one of their team members to do it, and after a couple months of me consulting and showing them like what they had to do, they were kind of quickly to come to the conclusion of, hey, you know what? Like, this is actually a lot more work than we thought it was. Why don't you guys just take it over, right? And going back to what we were talking about before, you have the small host, the intermediate, and like the large host, if you will. Every host should have somebody who focuses on their revenue management, whether it's either it's a third party like ourselves, or it's an in-house specialist. Like, you got to be in one of those 3 categories in today's climate, right? A couple of years ago, like 2021, 2022, you could have gotten away with the set it and forget it type of mentality. But as many hosts and probably all of everybody has seen in 2024, it's no longer the case, right? It's the competition has increased, demand has softened, and so you have to have somebody. You have to be in one of those 3 buckets, right? Educate yourself, or outsource it, or hire a specialist. Those are the kind of the 3 options that you have.
Because bottom line, if you're not doing one of those 3 things, you're leaving thousands, if not tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table. I know that you see that a lot when you're analyzing even just prospect client portfolios, and you literally uncover over $100,000 of revenue that they're missing out on with their current portfolio, with their current set of properties. It's not going out and acquiring new properties to make more money. It's optimizing what you already have to work harder for you, which is amazing. Jasper, I have
absolutely.
so many more questions for you, but we're running out of time. I think that we should break this into 2 parts. But before we do, let's tell people. So if somebody is above that $1 million mark and they are curious about that, maybe, or about this subject, they don't find themselves in one of those 3 buckets already, and they want to learn more. They don't necessarily have a really clear, certain grasp on how they're performing compared to the market, or if they potentially are missing out on those hundreds of thousands of dollars, like a lot of the people, a lot of the portfolios that we've seen. What's the next step? Can you tell them a little bit about the snapshot?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And, if people are interested, you can go to freewildfoundry.com/RPM. So freewildfoundry.com/RPM. That's where you can submit your application. And then what we do is we download data from your pricing tool, from your PMS, and we create comp sets, and we look at like, hey, how are your units performing compared to the comp sets that we generate? Then we look at your pricing strategy. We look at all your listings. We look at your marketing. And then I basically make an estimate of how much we think that we can increase the performance. And right now, like we this is not a service that we're trying to scale. This is not, we don't want like 100 clients, we just want like 10 to 15 clients that we enjoy working with, that are a good fit for our service, right? As you mentioned, we're looking for about $1 million top line plus. So, anywhere, our clients currently have anywhere between like 20 and 60 listings, I want to say. And the way that we do this snapshot, as I mentioned, we look at all the stuff and then we create a spreadsheet. We show you on the call. We'll show you exactly like, hey, look, this is where we think we can bring you. And we're very honest. Like there was clients too that are not clients. There's people that applied where we're like, hey, you know what? You are doing an incredible job. Can we help you? We probably can help you a little bit, but for the most part, you're crushing it. Keep doing what you're doing. Those are the exceptions to the rule, I would say. But, also if we don't think it's a good fit for us to work together, we do have resources, right, where we can help you, right? So we'll give you our honest opinion of like what we think is the best approach for you as an operator. So yeah, if you're curious, go ahead, freewildfoundry.com/RPM. And look forward to chatting and analyzing your portfolio. I love analyzing those portfolios. It's a lot of fun.
Yes, let's all feed Jasper's numbers obsession. Like Jasper said, totally, it's no pressure. It's just a really great way to get a third party, like an objective look at how you are performing, to see if you are doing as well as you could or if there's room for improvement. And we're only looking for a couple more clients who are that really great fit. So I'm again going to be the marketer here for a second. Act now, because space is limited and we would love to chat with you. So that is amazing. All right. Thank you, Jasper, for letting me play host today. And I can't wait to continue this conversation in part 2. This is so fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, we can go, because there's so much detail that we can go into. And I appreciate you being the host, because that's a lot easier. It's a lot easier for me to just answer a bunch of questions, because we were talking like, I was like, I need to record some podcasts, but it's hard to find the time right now. And you're like, hey, why don't I just ask the questions? So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And final call to action. If you have any questions about revenue management or pricing, please leave a comment, especially if you're watching on YouTube. It's super easy to comment over there. Or if you're listening on your favorite podcast player, then send us an email or, smoke signal, reach out in whatever way that you can. Yeah, exactly. And we'd love to answer some of your questions on future episodes. So that would be incredible to just hear where your head is at when it comes to revenue management and pricing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And people can always send me an email, Jasper@freewyld.com. is my the best email to write me at. And by the way, I do always respond to emails personally. I get emails sometimes and then I respond, and they're like, "Is this Jasper? Or is this like an assistant?" You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, we don't have an AI robot that has replaced Jasper yet.
not
Maybe
yet.
sometime in the future. And just in case you're doing the laundry or going for a run, Freewyld is spelt with a Y. So it's FREEWYLD, foundry.com/RPM. All right. Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll be back with part 2, and then Kaye, you'll be the host again, right?
Heck yes. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. All right, have a great week, everybody, and we'll be back soon.